To live is to choose, but to choose well, you must know who you are, what you stand for, where you want to go, and why you want to get there.
That was Kofi Annan addressing a commencement ceremony at MIT many years ago. Kofi Annan always followed his inner compass, and this compass led him to great achievements, including receiving the Nobel Peace Prize in 2001. Hello, I'm Ahmad Fawzi, and I had the pleasure and the privilege of working with Kofi Annan for over 25 years, accompanying him on many missions around the world as one of his spokespersons, and later on as his communication advisor. Over the past year, I've had the pleasure of hosting this first series of Kofi Time, a podcast brought to you by the Kofi Annan Foundation and the United Nations Information Service in Geneva. During the last 9 episodes, I discussed with influential experts and leaders who worked with Kofi Annan his unique legacy and its continued relevance to our troubled world today. We discussed how he went about solving crises and challenges in public health, conflict resolution, human rights, hunger, poverty. In this last episode, we look at the man himself and try to understand who he really was. I talked to people who worked with him day after day, whether at the United Nations or at the Kofi Annan Foundation, which he established later, and which he chaired until his death in 2018. Some were his senior political advisors, others his personal assistants, close protection officer, or spokesperson. I simply asked them what made him so special, and what it was like to work with him. They tell us stories of their time with him and stories he used to tell them. This is Kofi Annan, up close. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome Corinne Momal-Vanyan, the Executive Director of the Kofi Annan Foundation, who also served as Kofi Annan's Special Assistant in 2005 and 2006. Welcome, Corinne.
Thank you, Ahmad. I'm so happy to be here with you today for our final episode of Kofi Time. This is a special one, and we will turn the tables on you a little bit, if you allow. You have interviewed so many people for Kofi Time, but you also knew Kofi Annan very well. In fact, I don't think I've ever met a bigger fan of his, so we will hear you tell a story as well today.
I hope I'm able to hold back the tears, Corinne. You know us Mediterraneans, very emotional. Yes, I was, indeed, and I remain one of Kofi Annan's biggest admirers. His unique traits made him a first-class diplomat, in the sense that he could genuinely influence leaders and manage to build a special rapport with many, even the most difficult persons. I talked, for example, to Lakhdar Brahimi, who was his special representative in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Haiti, and many other places, and worked with him to resolve very difficult conflicts. This is what he says on Kofi Annan's leadership quality, his power of persuasion.
I will tell you of one quality that Kofi had that is extremely difficult to describe for me. It is this. Boutros Ghali, when he was Secretary General, had wanted me to go to Afghanistan and insisted very much about this. Yet I politely said no, because I knew absolutely nothing about Afghanistan. And it wasn't the right time or the right place for me to go. I suggested a name to Boutros, and he appointed him, and the man did quite well. Immediately after Kofi became Secretary General, he asked me to go to Afghanistan. And I found myself saying yes almost without realizing it. This is an incredible quality, difficult to describe, as I said. And, the man speaks in a very low voice, very calm. And he would tell you something like, I think that you could help us in Afghanistan. Of course, I know that you don't know enough about it, but you have been to places where you didn't know much, and yet you did very well. And at the end of a relatively short discussion, you find yourself that you say yes, and I said yes, and I went to Afghanistan in 1997. So this quality of making you go along with him. He will not make a long speech about United Nations and the needs of the humanity and the needs of the people of Afghanistan and so on. I don't know what he says. I don't remember what he said, but you find yourself going along with him. He is a man difficult to say no to, and that is a huge quality and an important one in a leader.
And that quality even worked with Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq, whom he convinced in 1998 to accept international inspections of his palaces. This is how Elizabeth Lindenmayer, who was also a close advisor to Kofi Annan for many years, described his trip to Baghdad in 1998 to meet Saddam Hussein and try to avert a war.
The power of his negotiating skills was unmatched. He always seemed to have a crystal ball telling him when to push, when to act, when to wait, and when to do nothing. I have never seen a sense of timing like his. It was remarkable. Kofi Annan had never met Saddam Hussein before and had no psychological profile of him. And this is a very good example of Kofi Annan's remarkable convincing skills. He started the meeting by pointing out the points that they had in common. He said to Saddam Hussein, "You smoke the cigar, so do I." And they exchanged cigars and smoked for a while. And then he said, "You are a man of faith, so am I," because Saddam Hussein had a carpet on which he prayed, I think 7 times a day. And then Kofi Annan appealed to his statesmanship and said, "Iraq has done so well, you cannot let it be bombed and destroyed."
And an agreement was signed. Not everyone was happy, and the bombing and the invasion of Iraq did happen a few years later. But Kofi Annan did what he had to do at that time. "My sacred duty," he said. And Jean-Marie Guéhenno, who was Under-Secretary General for Peacekeeping Operations, also told me how, in the name of peace, Kofi Annan was able to build a genuine rapport with leaders everywhere.
With heads of state, he was always so intuitive. I don't think he believed that you ever convince a head of state through the strength of an argument. Of course, you can try, but it's much more effective to nudge them, to instill that, to work around their objections in a subtle and empathetic way. That's what he did with many, many leaders around the world, and they respected him for that. I remember meetings with George W. Bush, and the relations between the United Nations and the United States at the time were not the best, to put it mildly. But he had managed to build some kind of personal rapport with the President of the United States, who appreciated him as a human being. And I think with Chirac that was the same. Chirac was very different from the kind of aristocratic person that Kofi Annan was in some ways. But they both recognize in each other the interest in human beings, the empathy for human beings. And that was his strength. That was one of his many strengths. That was how, in the world, he created that sense of hope that transformed situation, that transformed people. He transformed my life. He transformed the life of many people. And I think he did it because he himself was always eager to transform his own life, to make it wider, broader, to have a purpose in life that was broader than himself.
What is striking is that the skills of empathy and listening that he deployed with the leaders of the world were not simply diplomatic tools. They were an integral part of his personality. He behaved with everyone, including the staff around him, with exactly the same respect, the same warmth and courtesy. Listen to what Natalie MacDonald, who was his personal assistant for many years at his foundation, said.
The man in the office was the same man you could see giving a speech or speaking on the news. He spoke to everybody with the same respectful and interested attitude. Clear-minded, very well informed about world events and the topics he worked on. Yet when he had decisions to make, he would place multiple phone calls, read documentation, consult relevant actors, and really find a way to be informed of the multiple perspectives related to the situation. He knew how to listen. He really heard what was being said to him through and behind the words. He was extremely perceptive. And with Mr. Annan, a few well-chosen words went much further than a long, drawn-out speech. He cared about people and he took them seriously. And whilst having a deep insight into other people, he also knew himself very well. And I truly feel that that's something that went quite some way to making him as effective as he was. His understanding of people was, of course, really important in his work as a mediator, but it was also there in his dealings with anybody he encountered, including with us, his staff. He knew the importance of nurturing connections with family and friends, and would remember birthdays and anniversaries, and he would ask people about their lives and families with genuine interest. He would call people who were unwell to tell them to take care of themselves and feel better.
Ahmad, so many people have told us how Kofi Annan always took the time from his incredibly busy schedule to speak to men, women, and children around him and inquire about them. He always saw the individuals with their specific aspirations, challenges, and circumstances. And you saw that yourself one day.
Oh, I know what you're referring to, Corinne. Yes, that was a very special moment in my life. I was lying in hospital in New York in 2006 in a very bad condition, and I went into intensive care. I'll spare you the details, but people visited, people telephoned, and one of the telephone calls was from Nan Annan, Kofi Annan's wife. And she asked about me and about my health and what my wife was doing, in the knowledge that my wife had just delivered our first child, Bella. And Bella was born on the 8th of December, 2005. I was hospitalized on the 16th of January. So there was my 6-week-old daughter being looked after by her mother, my wife, May. And she asked me where they were. I mean, what would they do every day at this time of the day? Where would they be? And so I very simply told them they go to a cafe around the corner on York Avenue. And suddenly, just like in the movies, a black sedan pulls up in front of the cafe with an SUV behind it, also black with tinted windows. Two men exit the SUV, look around them. They open the door of the sedan, and out comes Kofi Annan. The other door, out comes Nana. They walk arm in arm to cross the street. I think the traffic light must have been red, so a lot of people notice this black African man with a goatee and this tall, elegant, blonde, white woman on his arm, crossing the street. And they stroll over to where May was sitting, my wife, with our 6-week-old baby in the pram, who suddenly realizes that she's looking at Kofi Annan and Mrs. Annan, Kofi Annan, the Secretary General of the United Nations, who walks over very gently. He used to walk hardly touching the ground sometimes. And I'm guessing he said, "Hello, May. Hello. How are you doing? How's the baby?" In that inimitable voice of his. It's difficult even now, with so much time having passed, it's difficult to relate the story without getting emotional. So that story illustrates what kind of a man he was. He was there on the 38th floor of UN headquarters in New York. His wife calls him and said, "I just spoke to Ahmad, let's go see how his wife is doing." He drops everything, gets into his car, and goes to see the wife of a staff member. And he did that with countless staff members, not just me.
You must have been incredibly touched. But you're right, this was wonderful, but not exceptional behavior on the part of Kofi Annan. He truly looked after those around him. Listen to Stéphane Dujarric, who was his spokesperson during the end of his second mandate.
My predecessor, Fred Eckhart, who was Kofi Annan's spokesman for a long time, both in peacekeeping and at Secretary General's office, hired me in 2000. And then when Fred abruptly retired in 2005, Kofi took a chance on me being his spokesman. I'd worked for him for 5 years, but I didn't have the long relationship that others around him had. And he supported me and gave me a chance. And for that, I will be forever grateful. And he also was very much present in my life and my wife's life when our second son was born in 2002 and was very, very ill, close to not making it. And he's now wonderfully healthy. But I will always remember him and Nan's attention to the staff members through challenging times when their personal lives were difficult.
Jean-Marie Guéhenno told me what he believed lay behind Kofi Annan's unique capacity for empathy.
The last time I saw Kofi Annan was at the Munich Security Conference of February 2018. He was, as always, very busy, but he asked me to come to his room before he left. And we talked for an hour. And in hindsight, I think it was a kind of a farewell meeting, an illustration of the way in which he cared so much for all the people who worked with him. I remember how he used to ask news about the ladies, as he said, my daughter and my wife. How he asked about the studies of my daughter. I remember, of course, when my mother died, how early in the morning, having immediately learned about it, he called, and his words meant enormously to me. But this enormous empathy that he had was something that I think guided his work. There are people who want to save humanity in a very abstract way. That was not his case. He wanted to save humanity because he loved human beings, because he cared about them.
And there's Mu'taz Khalil, one of his close protection officers, and Tasa Delenda, who was Kofi Annan's personal assistant to the United Nations for a long time. She was also part of his team when he was Special Envoy for Syria, after he was Secretary General. Listen to what Mu'taz and Tasa had to say about Kofi Annan.
He was considerate and caring to people around him, to staff and their well-being, and always very protective of his delegation. This made work with him, despite all the pressure, inspiring and motivating. He had a natural way with anyone who approached him, whether heads of state, children, elderly, indigenous people, or others. He had undeniable charisma that everybody attested to. He listened to people, and people listened to him. He believed in the UN value, in the strength that lies in its diversity. I live by one of his quotes when he was in a meeting with a group of university professors. He said, "If you want to achieve better solutions, do not hire yourself. Search for people with new ideas and different perspectives and skills."
And Tasa.
He talked to everyone and listened to their answers. He knew everyone by name. And most surprisingly, he knew their kids' names and he would ask after them. He had an incredible memory. He was very much loved and respected. When he was Secretary General, his former colleagues would get in touch with him, and he would always find time to meet with them, even if it was the last appointment of a very busy day. It was nice to hear them laugh.
One of the great things about Kofi was his laugh and his sense of humor. Even sometimes intense situations. Lakhdar Brahimi told me of a conversation he had with Kofi in Iraq after a meeting with Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz, and which became a running joke between them over the years.
He and I went to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Baghdad when we visited that country in 1998. And we met Tariq Aziz, who was then the foreign minister, to prepare for the meeting on the next day between Kofi and Saddam Hussein. We stayed at the ministry with Tariq Aziz very long. And I think it was well after midnight when Kofi and I left. We were in the lift, just the two of us, and he told me, "My dear Lakhdar, I don't think they pay us enough for what we are made to do." I told him, "Look, Kofi, I'll hold you on to that because I don't know who decides about your salary, but it is you who decide on my salary. So if you say that we are both not paid well enough, I'm sure you will want to do something about my salary." And this stayed between us as a kind of private joke for quite some time.
Tasa also remembers how Kofi Annan looked after people around him.
On a personal note, during our travels to Istanbul, he would always give me some time from the busy schedule to go and visit my brother at the cemetery. These actions of kindness and empathy made me respect him more, not mind working hard and long hours. Something that was amazing, regardless of his busy schedule, he would never forget birthdays and anniversaries of his family. Before starting his day, he would ask us to put aside some time to make his calls, to wish them, and to make sure we would send flowers to Mrs. Annan.
And Natalie made this observation.
I don't know where he found the time to help so many people on such a personal level, considering how busy he was with the global matters that he managed after his retirement from the UN. But it was clear to me that over many, many years, he cared about and believed in people. And he was utterly dedicated to looking for routes to peace, both globally and on personal levels, and helping those around him to do the same.
So all the testimonies show us how stubbornly dedicated Kofi Annan was to his mission. Speaking of dedication, Elizabeth Lindenmayer reminded me of a story that he often told.
And I finally would like to tell a story that the Secretary General would tell the member states often when he met them. It's the story of a hen and a pig. And the hen says to the pig, "I think that the two of us can solve the problem of famine in the world." And the pig asked, "Well, how do we do that?" And the hen said, "Well, it's simple. I will give eggs and you will give ham." And the pig answered, "Well, that is easy for you. You just give eggs. But for me, it's total dedication." And for Kofi Annan, working on peace was total dedication.
Kofi Annan dedicated all his life, until his very last weeks, to peace and democracy. I asked Lakhdar Brahimi, who accompanied him on his last trip to South Africa and Zimbabwe in the summer of 2018, how Kofi had seemed on that trip and whether he had slowed down in any way. This is what he had to say.
I think I told you that I had never seen Kofi as pale as I saw him in South Africa in July 2018. We were there in Johannesburg to celebrate the centenary of Mandela. We were representing the elders, of course. He was very, very pale. I asked him, "Well, are you sick, Kofi?" He said, "No, just tired." And he and I and Mary Robinson went to Zimbabwe, to Harare, because he had people from his foundation trying to help with the election that was taking place in a matter of days. And tired as he seemed to be, he never stopped. We were there for 1 day and a half only. He had meetings and visits from 9 o'clock in the morning till 11 p.m. at night. And we returned to South Africa. He then left to Zurich, I think on the 19th or 20th of July, and he fell sick on the plane, so much so that he didn't take his connection to Geneva as planned. He was taken to hospital immediately from the airport in Zurich. When he felt better, he went to Geneva, to his home. I called him then, and he said, he told me, "I am much better now." And I remember his words. I will remember them, I think, till I die myself. He said, "But you see, my dear Lakhdar, how weak we all can be." I think that these were his last words to me. Then he went to hospital again, and that was in August of the year, and he passed away in the hospital in August. He was quite a man. He was quite a leader and a very good friend.
Kofi Annan passed away on the 18th of August, 2018. Like all of us, Stéphane Dujarric remembers that day clearly.
And I remember that August 18th when I got the call that he had died. Our current Deputy Secretary General Mohammed called me, and it must have been 4 o'clock in the morning. And, I really broke down when I had heard he passed, to a point that when my wife thought my own father had passed away. And in a sense, Kofi has been my work father. There were a lot of people who worked longer and who were closer collaborators than him. But I will always be grateful for the opportunities he gave me, and for the time that I had to work with him, and most importantly, to learn from him.
And so am I, so grateful to have had the opportunity to serve at Kofi Annan's side. I remember I went to the funeral in Accra, and the President of the Republic used these words to describe Kofi Annan: charming, cosmopolitan, consensus builder, elegant, eloquent, gentle-mannered, modest, polyglot, proud, African, peacemaker, quintessential diplomat. These words, he said, are still inadequate to capture the fullness of the personality of Kofi Annan, one of the truly iconic figures of modern times. You have been listening to Kofi Time. Wherever you are, I invite you to share the values that Kofi Annan represented that you think are relevant today, using hashtag Kofi Time. Before concluding, I'd like to apologize for the quality of some of the recordings. They were all recorded separately in different locations. That's why you may have noticed a difference in the sound quality. I'd also like to thank everyone who participated in this podcast, and thank Corinne Mamal Vanyan for being with us today. And I mustn't forget our brilliant producer, Gianluca Alaria, who has worked magic throughout this podcast. And now the time has come for me to say goodbye. It's goodbye from me, Ahmad Fawzi. And the last word of this podcast series belongs to the man himself.
I yield my place to others with an obstinate feeling, a real obstinate feeling of hope for our common future.